p.m. and I'd like to call the February News Charter School Board of Directors meeting to order. I'd like to welcome everyone this evening. I shall begin by reading our ethics statement. Board members are reminded that it is our duty to avoid conflicts of interest and the appearance of conflicts of interest as we handle the work of this board. Does any member of the board know of any conflict of interest or any appearance of conflict with respect to any matters coming before us at this meeting? If so, please state them for the record. If during the course of the meeting you become aware of an actual or apparent conflict of interest, please bring the matter to the attention of the chair. It will then be your duty to abstain from participating in discussion on the matter and from voting on the matter. You could please review the agenda, and I'll entertain a motion to accept the agenda for this evening. Do we have a Okay, all right. So we will we will hold off on the voting on the current agenda and move to public comment. I have no one signed up this evening for public comment. Okay, thank you. We'll skip over, as we are waiting for two board members who are stuck in traffic. We will move to the Athletic Booster Club report.
I don't believe they have one for this month. I know that they've been collaborating with the Finance Committee, and there was a meeting of the Booster Club recently. I'm not sure if Mr. Dunn cares to give a report as he was able to attend.
Yeah, they did have, they had a Booster Club meeting last week, I think it was, and I just happened to be on campus, so I stopped by for a few minutes. They do have the money on hand to make the payment to the school. That was the agreement between the school and the Booster Club, from the shifting services for the schools go to the administrative services to take some of that work off them, so they were going to make a financial contribution. So they said they're in good shape to make that. So what they're obviously going to look at is, between now and the end of the year, some additional fundraising efforts for a couple other activities. One is looking for like gifts for coaches, because we did say that coaching introduces volunteers, and if they could financially provide some gifts, they would. So that's where, and they're looking at a couple of things for next year around. They've done a really good job of coordinating their spirit wear and trying to work together, between the teams. And over the summer, they want to look at doing some like digital platform capabilities, because they think they're missing some opportunities where actually people are asking for more stuff, and being able to provide it a little bit more streamlined. But they seem to be doing a good job of working together.
Thank you. Tara, would you like to give your SGA report?
Hi, nice to see you guys. So we are looking to start prom planning, because that's coming up in April. So we're really pushing our design, and we're looking at different options we have for decorations. We are going to look at a new project for the school for seniors. We want to see if we can have our senior class paint ceiling tiles in the school, but we do have to talk to a couple of our groundskeepers and discuss it with various people around the school first to make sure we can get approval and make sure we're okay to do that, and then we'll look more into that.
Very good. That sounds like fun. Okay, Ms. Pulliam, I'd like to give your director's report.
Thank you. Before I begin, I do want to announce that part of the reason why we're down a board member and probably some visitors is our women's basketball program is in the first round of state playoffs. They've actually qualified for that, so they're in Riverside. So that took several people, including Mr. Smith, as I sent him to make sure that our students were cared for at that away setting. In addition, we've had recently a lot of activity with our band program and students being recognized both regionally and at the state level. So again, a continued thank you to the board for supporting the development of the band room. It's really helped to make sure that the students have an adequate space for learning what they need to participate in those programs. It's not directly linked to student government, but it is a student-driven project. The annual blood drive is coming up. It is something that's actually run by an individual student. It's something that they work with the Red Cross on, and that's Alexis Plaque. So just as a reminder, March 15th is our date for the blood drive, and just to help announce, there are still some slots open from 4:30 to 5:30 on that day to donate. So if you've not already done so, our Facebook discussion page has the link. There might be some other locations where you can find the link to pick up one of those time slots if you personally would like to donate blood and save a life. And with that, I'll go into my formal remarks. And so we'll start with our Good News at Noose video presentation. This month, I think we're highlighting the Senior Academy, but of course, there'll be students from all around the campus. And I'll turn your attention to the video screen. Special thank you to our administrative team for putting that together. As you can tell, lots of highlights from homecoming. As a reminder to those who watch at home, homecoming for us always happens during basketball season, as that's our main sport, and so a lot of celebrating in the Senior Academy with that big milestone for us. As far as our 2019-20, it's time to stop talking about 18-19 and start talking about 2019-20. The enrollment lottery is underway in terms of accepting applications to date between siblings of existing students, children of staff members, and unique individual applications coming from the outside community. We've already received 347 applications to date, and the window does not close until March 20th at 11:59 a.m. As a reminder to anyone who's watching, there is no time or date stamp stamp on those applications received prior to March 20th at 11:59 a.m. They all have the same weight, the same value. They get entered into the lottery the same. If you turn in your application after that time, they do start getting time and date stamped and get put to the bottom of the wait list in the order that they're received. So it behooves someone, they have their best chance of getting a seat by putting that application in prior to the March 20th deadline. As a reminder, March 21st will be when we hold the annual lottery, and that'll be here in the Commons area. Of course, we invite our board members to join us, and we'll need at least 1 or 2 board members to officially convene the meeting. Applications can be submitted both online and in person. We have limited it to these 2 entrance points. One for simplicity for our parents. Go online, fill out the form. We capture all of your information, or come into the store, or come into the front office and fill out a paper application and submit it. It also helps us to alleviate any chances that emailed or faxed applications get lost in spam or into junk mail, and it makes sure that each application is handled appropriately and entered appropriately into the lottery. As far as the staffing update goes, we do still have our total approved positions at 91. We have 2 current vacancies, sort of. The executive committee was able to give approval to those last 2 positions, but we will be talking about that in closed session as a personnel item. For 18-19 calendar, nothing has changed there. For 19-20, you did approve the calendar at the last board meeting, and we just wanted to make a note that it has been posted to the school's website, and we'll continue to post links to that in our regular email communications. And generally speaking, I think we send a paper copy home with students in their final report card. For celebrations, we have 1 more celebration for this school year. That'll be April 23rd. Again, that'll start at 5:30, just prior to the board meeting at 6 o'clock, and that's where we'll recognize core value award winners and any other board level awards for students. Now we'll move into the more academic portions of my presentation. The PLUS update, Dr. Silver is going to help us out a little bit by referring us to a handout that's in your packet. You're starting to get used to the format of that one. The forward focus for our PLUS team will be revisiting all of the performance data sets and continuing progress toward a comprehensive assessment plan. That's the original charge of the PLUS leadership team to address all core competencies. In my notes, you'll see some direct connections to each of the competencies in terms of where the work is headed. In the notes from the PLUS leadership team, it's a little bit more in a story format so that you can see what's been going on and what's up next. So that's this handout here with a list of members and a few bullet items. The Primary Academy went ahead and went full bore into our new writing program and actually administered a writing benchmark assessment with the last round of benchmarks. And they're using that data to figure out what teachers need in order to be able to assess those with fidelity across all grades in the Primary Academy. Some lessons that we've learned are that some teachers will need additional training on how to use the rubric. We could do some cross-checking to make sure that we're getting authentic results from that assessment tool. In addition, we're finding that competency-based education is really starting to get its feet underneath it for us from an assessment perspective. Our kindergarten through 2nd grade team has really taken the lead to start aligning that, and Ms. Endor will talk about that more in her portion of today's report. But we wanted to let you know that the committee itself is looking at it from a campus perspective. And then the next rubric that they'll be working on beyond writing will be the speaking and the listening portion of component 1 of the competencies, the communicate effectively to a variety of audiences through written and spoken language, so that we can continue to build those tools so we can have that formal assessment plan in place as fast as possible. I have a reminder for you about the strategic framework. Essentially, the language there is the same as it was from the last meeting, but knowing that it's coming up this Saturday. As a reminder, it's March 2nd from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Ms. Dixon will give us the location shortly, I think. And then I do want to go ahead and turn it over to the rest of the staff to talk about the state of academics. Dr. Silver has prepared a general handout for you that talks a little bit about Primary Academy data results as of today. What we're planning to do for you is a series of updates, and we'll start with the Primary Academy this month. We'll use March for Intermediate Academy updates, and then we'll use April for Senior Academy updates. The ACT was just administered last week, and we're hopeful to get some of the preliminary results in time for that April report. So with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Silver and Ms. Endor.
The data handout that you have before you, good evening. The data handout that you have before you is an overview of the primary academy. It contains data representative of the M-class assessments for both the beginning of the year, BOY, middle of the year, MOY. This year, you'll notice something different. Last year, we looked at just the TRC, which speaks to the reading comprehension skills. This year, in addition to that, we've also been tracking the DIBELS. Now, DIBELS speaks to their foundational skills, like their nonsense words, being able to recognize those type things. And Ms. Sandora is going to go a little bit more in depth as well, because we believe that you have to have both to tell the true story and accurately assess where our students are. Also, you'll see an ELA benchmark, and you'll see a math benchmark. And to provide you with a frame of reference with where we have been in the past, you'll also see for the grade levels that have an end of grade exam, you'll see how we performed last year, so you can gauge and have a reference point with the data that we're presenting with where we are at this point in time. I'm gonna be turning it over to Ms. Sandora so that she can tell you the story behind the data and provide you with some granular details.
We'll swap out the microphone so that.
Good evening, everyone. All right, go ahead, Dr. Swartzman. So the story behind the data is what we're going to be looking at here, because I know a lot of these numbers and these acronyms are kind of confusing.
So I'm sorry, I have forwarded the presentation, however, it is not forwarding
Okay,
on.
so just to kind of break down, I know M-Class is a foreign term here. We're used to EOG and EOC. M-Class is the reading tracking tool that we use, the state of North Carolina uses. It's our assessment tool that diagnostically looks at our reading levels for our students. So the two components that Dr. Silver mentioned are DIBELS and TRC. DIBELS refers to the phonetic components, word recognition, can I decode and use my decoding patterns when I'm reading. And then TRC is what puts it together. Am I able to fluently read and use decoding patterns, and also am I able to comprehend? So just to kind of summarize, now going on to the presentation, what we're looking at here. Here are some things that are new in 2018-19. Previously, we had not benchmark tested in math other than in grades 3 and 4 prior to this year. So for this year, we benchmark tested our math, in each grade from grades 1 to 4. North Carolina actually realigned the M-Class levels for 2018 and 2019 for the school year. And what this means is when we look at our TRC, when the children are reading a book and answering comprehension questions, we've gone from one question to more critical thinking questions where we're seeing two-part questions. So the questions have now realigned, causing our levels to kind of renorm across the state. We've also broken down our benchmark and M-Class data scores to drive our instruction. So averages, even on this paper, the averages that you're seeing is not what my teachers look at. We look at the student's individual average, and then we look at where they fall with each of the standards that are assessed, and where they're falling high, medium, low, and where we need to accelerate, remediate those things. We've also continued our kindergarten assessments. So kindergarten does assess. It's a little known factor. They assess every quarter. They do performance assessment tasks in reading and math based on the basic skills that the children need to master, in addition to the TRC and DIBELS testing through M-Class in the beginning, middle, and end of year. And we've also continued our reading benchmarks in grades 3 and 4. We're considering possibly doing an end of year benchmark as well in second grade. I'm working with the teachers now to determine whether we want to just do M-Class this year, or do we want to have an assessment that kind of gives us an idea where those children are going to fall when we look forward at the BOG for them in third grade. So the things that we're using to support Letterland in K2 is a phonetic-based program, which is aligned to teaching children the phonetic patterns that they're going to need to read when they're using their different decoding skills. And it's through K through 2 we're using it. North Carolina realigned their math core standards for this year. So we've been using the North Carolina Wiki to realign our instructions and make sure we've aligned our assessments to what needs to be covered. Title I tutoring is the other piece. Through Dr. Silver and the Title I team, we've identified students who need that specific remediation, and those students are getting targeted pull-out instruction to support them. And then also using data to drive instruction. That's the big thing that I'm going to continue to harp. We're not just seeing these numbers, what are we doing with them? So when you look at our assessment, go ahead.
So in class, that's just for reading assessment?
That's reading and math.
Oh,
We're
it's reading and math is in class?
for M-Class is reading, I'm sorry. It's just, so other programs you might have heard of, there's DRA, which is the one I'm most familiar with, which I use for most of my teaching career. There's Fontes and Pinnell. The purpose is, it's having the students sit down, read, and assessing, are they able to decode and read fluently and apply their skills to read, but then it's that second piece, am I able to comprehend what I'm reading?
But also all of the math stuff was internal assessment?
Math is internal assessments. So when you look at our assessment results, so looking at these numbers, one thing to note, M-Class levels are showing a drop statewide with the text questions. Students who were at one level last year might have dropped several levels from for our testing this year. That is across the state. So that is something that everyone is seeing. And when we say drop, it doesn't mean that they're not reading as well as they used to. We're accurately assessing where their comprehension level is. And for us in second, third, and third grade, this is extremely important because what we've noticed with our data from last year is my M-Class level says one thing, my EOG and my grades say another thing. And that's a big area that we've started to have conversations. The next thing is we're noticing that critical thinking skills need growth. With these realigned questions, with these two-part questions where children have to answer and then explain why, we're noticing that we need to start pushing this sooner. So we're going to be talking about how we're addressing that already. Finally, nonfiction comprehension skills from our last benchmark in both third and fourth grade were identified as areas of weakness, which is not uncommon. It's an area where it's a little bit harder. Students have to read a little bit more above their head, and we need to focus on more strategy-based instruction to help them.
One question. So you said that M-Class levels were showing a discrepancy as compared to the EOGs?
As compared to, if I'm looking at my child's M-Class level from last year, what we saw mostly in August, where my child was in May of last year, differs from where we were in August of this year. It's normal to see what we call a summer slip, but it was a little bit more than normal. But when you look at the text questions, they're much more aligned to what we need to see at that grade level.
Okay, you said there was, I thought you said something like the M-Class assessments didn't correlate with the EOG? Okay.
M-Class doesn't correlate with, it's a diagnostic tool that we use to assess a child's reading level.
Okay, I was trying to say.
I think he's referencing a comment that you made about last year's data
I'm
maybe
sorry.
didn't align for a student. What you were seeing in M-Class and what you were
Yes.
seeing in benchmarks may or may not have been what you
So-
saw in their EOG.
Right. So my reading level at the end of last year was on level for third grade, possibly above, but I scored a 1 or 2 on the EOG.
That's what that was.
And I'm sorry, I misunderstood your
No, that's-
question.
I mean, that's-
So when I looked at some of those things this summer and I went, what's going on here? What we've seen now is that has shifted with some of our students, like, oh, this is more accurately representing where they have been along their path, their trajectory.
So was that a statewide, is that a statewide variance between, or I guess you?
I can't speak
Everybody across the
broad.
state uses M-Class,
Yes,
right?
yes. Our literacy rep is Miss Samantha Dunn, our first grade teacher, and I know that when she went to her M-Class literacy training in January, one thing that was noted was a lot of the different administrators and teachers and reading specialists in the room said their schools and their districts were seeing shifts in the children's reading level. So we're seeing this across the state. It's not just here. Now, as far as the discrepancy between I read here for a third grade and a third grade M-Class level, and my EOG score was this, that I can't confirm for.
Okay.
other
I think our situation is twofold, and correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes.
One is the realignment of the assessment and
Yes.
putting more challenging questions into the assessment for the students, and the other is some training that was needed for some of our staff to be able to administer the M-Class with fidelity.
Yes.
And so a lot of that has happened through having a trained literacy specialist on campus has
Yes.
really helped us to make sure that when our teachers administer the assessment, because it is one that, if done improperly, can be a little bit subjective because the teacher's evaluating the student's responses. So making sure that everybody across the board evaluates those responses sort of against the same rubric or the same sort of frame has been really helping us to get everything aligned better, so we're getting a truer picture of our students' performance levels.
Yeah, I'm just curious, anytime
Yes.
two data sets in the same area say a different thing,
Absolutely.
I always ask the question of, do we understand why, and then maybe determine what Jim
Yeah.
is. Thank you.
Okay. So moving on to math, when we look at our assessments from our in-house benchmark data, we're slowly learning, and actually we will speak to what they're doing in first grade this year that differs. Place value concepts seem to need to be taught before we do our operation skills, our addition, our subtraction with regrouping, our multiplication, our division, and then when we move to our long division, our 2-digit multiplication and 3-digit multiplication. We're seeing that might be something we need to trial in other areas. Our first grade team looked at their curriculum over the summer and said, hey, let's try and switch some things around. They taught place value concepts prior to teaching addition and subtraction, fact fluency strategies to 20, and their results are showing a lot more growth, and students are grasping concepts a lot better. So as we look in 3rd and 4th grade and we see that we're not progressing with certain skills because of place value and operation deficiencies, we're looking and saying maybe in the future we need to now start to put this into other grade levels. So we're taking that data and trying to figure out what's our plan going forward. Multi-step word problems is something that we're also taking a closer look at. A lot of students, when our teachers have gone back through their benchmark with them, they're going, oh, I went for the distractor answer. We're not working through the full problem. So that's an area of concern, teaching them to go through the full process, use their strategies they're learning. And then also that connection between reading and math, as it's something that I think is a little foreign to some of us, but now more than ever, especially 2nd grade up, our math is very word problem dependent. Students are having to read, analyze, and then apply their math strategies. So we're now seeing that correlation. If I have some gaps with my reading skills, I'm going to probably struggle a little bit when I get to those word problems. Any questions there? Okay, so taking a look at things going forward. Obviously, if you haven't heard it enough, we're going to continue to use data to drive instruction. That has to be a key, and not just pinpointing numbers and, well, this is what your average is. Where do I need the support the most? Where do I need the growth the most? Our K2 vertical articulation through competency-based grading has already opened a lot of eyes and doors. In our conversations, now that we've finished breaking down our math standards into the specific skills we need to teach, we've noticed areas where I need to have my students here in 1 grade. In the prior year, you only go to here with this skill. Can we noose it up, as we say, and can we go to this area here so that way I have an easier time building the skill? Those conversations are already going on, and these are very, very important because those foundational years are what help us keep those cracks from forming with some of our students. So that articulation has proved to be very beneficial. Cougar time remediation and the common debate of strategies versus skills. As teachers, we have to teach our required standards and skills. We also have to teach the strategies to our students of how to apply our learning with those skills. So that's what our Cougar time remediation is focusing on right now. Let's group our students by what they need the most, and let's work on strategies for reading a nonfiction text, and how can I aid my comprehension? Let's work through strategies for solving a multi-step word problem. We're going to continue to promote our critical thinking comprehension earlier, starting now. I know 2nd grade, each of our teachers has selected a book that they're going to be doing in a Friday book club where they're working on comprehension, specifically looking at higher order comprehension strategies. So each of the teachers is picking a book. The students are going to be moving to different classrooms, and we're going to try and pilot and see how the students do with that as a start before we move into a little bit more specific instruction with critical thinking a little earlier next year. The next point is identification of students who are currently not meeting grade level timelines. We have to kind of be open and honest about where we need our students to be, where they are right now, and what the plan needs to be for those students, and how we're going to either get them to where they need to be or what the plan needs to be if they're not at grade level. And then we're also going to be starting our work with MTSS and our counseling team with PBIS for 2019-2020. If you don't know what PBIS is, it's Positive Behavior Incentive Systems, getting some behavioral and different supports in our primary academy to provide more structure. It's a key component in some of the data you're seeing here. It's not always the academic piece. There's other factors we need to look at.
What is MTSS?
MTSS is North Carolina's multi-tiered systems of support for all students, and it's our program that kind of feeds into our students we should always have 80% of our students who are mastering our concepts, and what do we do with those 20% who might not be there? Whether it be I'm struggling or I'm flying high above and I need somebody to push and accelerate me.
What conversations happen around pacing? Our engineering department is doing this survey with public schools, and a lot of the teachers are like, we just have so much to cover that sometimes you have to just keep moving, and students have breadth, but they don't have depth, especially in math.
Yes.
And so, is that something that you look at as part of your plan? Because
Yes. Yes. So now that we've broken down our skills and we've had the conversations about, I need this skill mastered here, so can you do this here? Now we need to organize them into curriculum units. What do we want covered quarter one? What do we want quarter two, quarter three, quarter four? And then start to talk about how do we pace ourselves through. Prior to this year, we're following our state standards, but this is something that we're lacking. So we're building it as we speak with K2, and then the next plan is to roll up to 3-4. 2020, 2021.
And to add detail to that, at some point, would the team come up with, this is just an area we're not going to spend a lot of time on because the pace just won't allow for us to do a high-quality job in other areas? Do they have to make those types of critical decisions, I think is part of the
Yes, that's a lot of our conversations in our PLC meetings. Well, the assessment is going to be covering this, but I'm still here. And then we have those conversations about, well, does that need that amount of time, that amount of focus? What's the end goal that we're looking at here? Also, the flip side of that, I brushed over this, but maybe I really need to go back and give that a little bit more time.
I mean, do they have what they would have, do the teachers say, multiplication is something where we need depth? And what do they consider mastery then? Because that's such a key. I mean, we have students and they're like, I can't do algebra. And when you really start peeling away the layer, they don't know their multiplications. I mean, so you're not gonna be able to do algebra. And so we gotta go all the way back to the beginning. And we see a lot of students, they remember the last thing, like from high school, but when you go back to things they should really have depth in from elementary school, they're so shallow that they really haven't maintained it over the 12 years.
So that goes back to some of the conversations we're having as we unpacked our skills. I think the biggest one that sticks out to me is when I talk to second grade and some of the children are struggling with addition and subtraction with regrouping. Well, let's talk about their fact fluency. How are they doing with their facts? Well, they know their facts, but when I'm doing them on a time test, this is where they are. And we talked about, again, the depth. They have to have them in order to be able to do addition and subtraction with regrouping and master the next concept. My facts have to be like this. So that's a lot of the conversations we're opening up. In addition, going down to K, well, they're working on addition and subtraction to, I think right now they're to 7. They're doing that. But do they know what a plus sign is? Do they know what a minus sign is? Do they know what an equal sign is? Well, of course they do, but that still needs to be a skill that we put as a possible area that we put on a report card, because I might know it when you say it, but when I see it, I might not understand that representation. So we're starting to have those conversations. This is something we're going to have to really, really continue to work at. We're going to have to grow with it.
There was a mention on the previous slide, I think it was about, can you go back one second?
Sorry.
It was about the Title I services.
Yes.
I was in that first slide.
Title I tutoring?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
so can you talk a little bit about like what did we communicate to parents in regards to like services around Title I tutoring? What do we deliver? How do students do? How do we know how they're doing? Kind of.
I'm going to shift to Dr. Silver as she oversees our Title I team.
Oh.
And while we have a moment, just to remind everyone that we qualify for Title I funds based on a demographic that we have, but the students that receive Title I services are identified based on academic need. So the students that are identified, and Dr. Silver can talk a little bit about what types of data we use to identify the students, but it is based solely on academic need in alignment with our Title I plan. So it means nothing about who you are or what you are, it just means that you need academic services, and we can use these funds to provide those.
So, because Title I is a federally funded program, we have strict guidelines that we have to operate within for that particular program. One of those guidelines deals with communication to parents and parent involvement. So we have templates that we have downloaded from the federal Title I website that dictates how our communication letters look to parents. So we have to send a communication letter home to the parents to let them know, hey, your child is eligible for services. They will begin services on this date. And when the students reach that amount of growth that they need, where they're back on grade level and they're able to function in class, we have to send that parent a letter saying, hey, congratulations, your child has met growth, they're back on grade level, and we will be exiting them from receiving services. However, if they do fall below grade level again, they may re-enter services.
So did we, for the students that we said qualified for Title I services, did we do those assessments at the beginning of the year to determine like which students are in need of those services?
So another mandate of Title I is that you are bound to look at multiple data sets. You're bound to look at a variety of data sets. So some of those data sets that we look at to determine whether they qualify for services or not, we look at, did they fail the previous year's EOG, or were they a red or a yellow with the previous year's end of year M class? We look at those two items. We also look at currently for their benchmark. So let's say that for benchmark 1, the child was in that lowest percentile of scores.
Which was given when? When was the benchmark 1 given?
Benchmark 1 was given in the fall.
At the beginning of the year?
It was given in fall, October.
It was given in October?
Mhm.
Okay.
So we'll also look at that benchmark data. So let's say for the first benchmark that student scored in the lowest percentile at the bottom, then that's an indicator. We also look at their grades. So for their quarter 1 grade, were they below grade level?
When did we send a letter in the fall to parents that had students that were?
The very first letter that went home in the fall was towards the beginning of the year, and that was based upon their previous year's performance.
So and is it reading only? In class?
No. Title I services are for reading and for math. K-8.
In class only does reading, right?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just trying to say, so basically, for math, then for last year's, it would have been based on, if you did it at the beginning of the year, you either had to do an assessment, or it was based on the EOGs from the previous year.
Correct.
So if they failed the EOG from the last year, coming into this year, they would immediately gotten a letter saying.
Right. They were deemed a risk of failure, and that's what Title I is for, anyone that is at risk of failing.
And so then the reading would have been based on the M-class assessments for the last year.
Or the EOG.
Or the EOG. So, but we sent those at the beginning of the year. And
And then we reassess, with Title I, we call it shuffling the deck. So we'll send it out at the beginning of the year, and then when that first benchmark takes place, we reshuffle the deck.
Right.
So more letters go out, so kids are constantly coming in and going out of services.
Right, but when we sent that letter and we assessed the students at the first of the year, right? We had plans that we actioned between then and the reassessment in October.
We had tutors doing, once again, we had tutors doing pull-out services, and for intermediate, even Dr. Schwartzlander got in on the action, and she was doing small group instruction. So, and we had teachers that actually stepped their game up and said, I'm gonna provide these until we can get that vacancy filled. So we had teachers step up and provide interventions in the form of small group instruction as well.
So was there any communication between the first and the reassessment about what?
Yes, we have to send communication home to the parents. That's one of the mandates of the program.
about the activities or the fact that we reassessed and said, you know, hey, your student's still in the need of services, or your student is, now doesn't need the services?
For the
I'm talking about
activ-
between those periods of
Okay,
time.
for the activities that take place, our tutors and now our Title I Success Coach, they go and they visit the PLCs, the teacher PLC meetings, and they give them the feedback there. This child is progressing on this. They've accomplished this, now can you tell me what they've done here? So that is done via the teacher. So when the teacher is sending that report home, they're also putting in there how they're performing, what they're improving on, what they haven't
So it's the
improved
teacher's
on.
responsibility for that particular student and that particular subject? to
Yes,
communicate
that's
back
how
and
we're communicating at this point. And then now you're also going to see that we're going to start, now that we have a full team, we're going to start doing the Title I Family Nights. That is another mandate by the federal program. You must offer a set amount of Title I parent nights, and what those nights are activity nights where you invite the Title I families to the campus, you educate them on activities or resources that they can use at home to boost their students' skill set. It's all about teaching the parents how to support them when they're away from campus. So we'll be engaged in those activities. We'll play some fun games because not only is it for the parents, but it's for the students as well. That's why we call it Title I Family Night. So you'll probably hear the kids say, yeah, I went and I won prizes and we played games, and you hear the parents say the same thing. But that's the kind of,
How many students do we have that qualified for Title I services at the beginning of the year?
at the beginning of the year,
163.
yep, 163.
163? And then how many at the reassessment in October?
October, that number went down. So that number, I think we dropped to maybe like 80 something around that time.
So
And
we had
we've
50% that didn't need services?
No, 80 something students, K through 8. So that number dropped. And then it
But
comes,
at the beginning of the year, you said it's 160 something? And in October, when
it
we
fluctuates. It fluctuates. So when we take this next benchmark, it could be back up to 100 students that we've identified that we're actually servicing. It just fluctuates. It's constant moving in and out.
I think that's the kind of number that's a good one to trend, right? To see
Absolutely.
how we trend over the services needs. Because
I
ideally,
think
we
it's
like.
not the same students, it may not be the
Correct.
same.
Right, oh, yeah,
Mhm.
that's what I'm
So they're going in
saying.
or
So you
out.
need another layer of explanation under the top level number that says, is it the same group of students? Is it attrition within the number? I mean, okay.
So you track each student, because if a student is on their third benchmark with Title I services and they have not improved, then what?
Then we're looking at we're always in constant communication with the teachers. Every week, the Title I team is going to meet with the teachers when they have their PLCs. They're constantly emailing back and forth saying, hey, have you tried this? Have you tried that? What are you doing in the classroom? Here's some interventions that are working well with us when we pull them out. Have you tried this with them in the classroom? So it's always constant communication. We're tracking the students to see if they're fluctuating, if they're growing, and if they're not growing, we're having those conversations in PLC.
And is there funding?
No, I'm just saying, what does that do if after 2 times the student hasn't improved?
That's where the MTSS process would kick in.
Yes, and at that point in time, that's a child, if I'm not growing, I'm getting the interventions in the classroom, I'm getting a pull-out intervention, then we need to make sure that there's nothing outside factors through our EC services that we need to explore for that.
That's when the conversation becomes, we start to look at, okay, could it be social? Could it be emotional or behavior support? What role is attendance playing in this? We look at all of those external factors. That's when we start to look at that first and rule that out. Then we're looking to see, okay, has this student been tested or has ever been recommended or considered for testing for Exceptional Children's Program? We start looking at that. So all those things we start to look at and collect those data sets.
So what is do you have an effectiveness rating for your students? So after one cycle of Title I services, they typically are out by the next benchmark, or what is your success rate with this?
Right now,
I mean, not that we're turning down the money or anything like
Right.
that, but I'm just.
Yeah.
I'm just
Complicating
wondering.
factor this year is just the vacancy that we had for such a long time, and the tutors
what I
were
was
by
gonna
themselves
say.
without a permanent teacher. So we'll get much more robust data this semester with a full team in place, but we certainly will look to see what information we can provide based on just the fall services that we're administering.
But I can tell you right now, when we look at the data, there was a tremendous amount of students exited from 5th grade services. That was the top ranking grade level with the most exits that we've seen thus far. And most of those, I'd say a good 75% of those kids, they just did one cycle.
So the funding for that, then, like when we did our assessments at the beginning of the year, when we submitted for the funding, is that based on the assessments that, what we determined, like whatever level we set, or did?
So what we're asked to do, there's a consolidated application that we fill out that the state's actually been great to provide for all federal funds. At the end of the school year, we all sit down and start doing needs assessment. We work with the school improvement team and we do a needs assessment. What is it that our students most need, period, regardless of where the funding comes from? As we develop that needs assessment and put it into the grant application, then we have to start putting the details behind what are some steps we're going to take. Are we going to use tutors and people and personnel? Are we going to purchase kits? Are we going to purchase contract services with a vendor to come in and do some special training? So we have to determine what the need is. And for us, we've always, for the last 2 or 3 years, we've just identified that gap in reading and math for certain groups of students is just so strong that the personnel piece is the strategy that we really want to use. We'd rather reserve purchasing kits and things like that with operational funds than with the federal dollars. The other thing, just quite candidly, if we start talking about technology and that sort of thing, there's all kinds of tracking regulations. So we really try to avoid targeting any strategies with the federal funds that would require that labor-intensive tracking, because our dollars just aren't that great to begin with, and we feel like we get more out of them by using part-time tutors and a full-time staff member to be able to get as many students with services
So the
as
strategy for
possible.
that particular one was we were attempting to hire one person.
One full-time person and then tutors to fill in, so that way we can, because if you only have one, let's say we hire 2 full-time people, then that's only 2 people to access the students at any given point in the day. But if I can hire a bunch of part-time tutors, I can actually get more students in front of those high-quality tutors. And because it is federal funding, they all have to be certified instructors. It has to be a highly qualified teacher, so to make sure that they're receiving those services. And we're really well pleased with the tutors that we have. They're a phenomenal group that just want to work part-time, that are excellent.
They're all like contract
Either-
part-time?
Mhm.
How many, I mean?
We have 3 in place.
Oh, so 3, like 1 English, 2 math, or something?
Right now, we're running 2 English and 1 math, and our success coach that's full-time, she's a split. So she splits English and math.
And then, so when we communicate back to the parents, do we give them data about like how we determine the kid grew and potentially continues to need services, or just to build some confidence that what we're doing is translating to either more or it justifies the reason we need to consider additional things?
That's another federal mandate of Title I. You must progress monitor any students receiving intervention. So we are bound to progress monitor those students, and we share that data with the teacher teams in their weekly PLCs.
And is it optional that they translate that to parents, or do they have to translate that to parents?
That is at
The data itself.
That is at the discretion of the academy leader as to what they have to communicate and what they do not. So I
And
guess they
the
both
data
answer.
points that we use are the ones that we've just addressed, so all of the teachers are required to send that information out. Yes.
It's important to understand that Title I is an add-on service, it's not a replacement service. So it's not intended to stand apart and separate from the classroom teacher and the classroom instruction. So it really is intended to inform what's happening in the classroom and to support the student with whatever gaps they have. So we really prefer for the classroom teacher to have as much communication with the parents as they can, but it's important that they know what's actually happening in order to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for me?
I think we're all set.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you, that concludes my report.
Good job. Thank you.
Okay, let's go back, and we're almost done with the agenda.
Madam
Approve the
Chair,
agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda and the minutes from the previous meeting as presented.
Thank you. Second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed. Okay, so we're on to committee reports. Executive committee met and met, we had several pieces of business. So we have a legal contract that was approved by executive committee that needs to be ratified by the full board. It is formal letter of agreement is in your packet.
Make the motion to approve.
Does everyone have it?
Oh, that was, yeah. Okay.
One page.
Paul made a motion.
Second.
Any discussion, questions? The executive committee's recommendation. Any questions or discussion?
I don't know, it's a pedestrian sort of a question. Is this the same kind of process that we would hire a landscaper? Do we just put out for 3 bids, or is there a recommending agency that we go through to get referred to someone like that?
We did have a recommendation from a state agency.
Perfect, thank you.
Are we ready for the vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The second item of business from executive committee was the personnel recommendations from the executive director that were reviewed and approved, and we would now, which are,
Doing discussion or anything.
the executive committee discussed it, so we don't.
The rest of the board is going to ratify the decision if they have questions about the decision.
Okay. We will take the second item of business up in closed session. And that was it for executive committee. Finance committee?
Let's circle back on that. I got a question. There's something in the packet, so.
Okay. Resource committee? Okay. Academic Affairs Committee did not meet, or Development Committee?
Just a quick update, we did post on our website about our applications being accepted for board nominations. The nominations closed, I think it's going to be March 15th. It's on the we accept applications until then. And then I believe Susan also emailed it, asked her today to email it to the PTO. And I don't know if we have received, I have not received any, and it would be submitted to the office, so I have not received any. Also did an email to determine what our current board members would be continuing to serve next year.
Ms. Denning, there was a question from the PTO, or the Parent Ambassador Group. We did have several business members volunteer to be science fair judges. Would you like us to circulate it to that group as well?
Sure.
Okay.
Here it is.
And so did we do an announcement to the entire campus that the nomination?
That was the first thing. was it sent to was it emailed out to the school? Or?
It was posted to the main website, and we'll be including it in this week's letters that go out from everybody, the Academy
And
leader.
can you confirm, I know I gave you a name for but can you confirm who you selected for the nominating committee besides us? Mr. Cummings was Jason?
That is correct.
Okay.
And I will communicate with him
Okay.
tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
For the current board members, I think everyone is serving next year with the exception of Mr. Lloyd. And yes, and Mr. Johnson, I guess. I did not email him about was his resignation already in place?
Mhm.
Okay, so yeah, I did not include him on my email. And so that will leave us with 6 board members starting now, or starting at until we get our committee members on.
Okay.
And, well, 7, but assuming that we have more come on after Mr. Lloyd retires.
Well, his is until the end, so July 1, we could have up to 11.
That's correct.
Okay.
And then the March meeting will close nominations.
Any questions on the nomination process? I do,
Did we do a bit of I know one of the years before, we kind of did a little bit of a roundtable about like a needs assessment. Would that be nominating committee through the month of March to kind
Yeah.
of do that and assess against applications?
Yeah, so if anyone has any suggestions,
Okay.
if you want to email me,
Yeah.
that'd be great.
We'll do.
And just to clarify, we will have as many as how many?
We can have up to 11 board members, a minimum of 5 board members. Currently, we have 7 with Mr. Lloyd being on beginning July 1, and that would leave us with 6, assuming we don't have any other board members.
Chris was till the end of the term, but he had said that he could not
We
attend.
have 8 through June
Yeah,
30th.
okay.
Yeah, he could not attend
That's
the
what I-
January and February
Yeah, that's what
meeting.
I apologize.
On July 1st, you'll have 6 unless you elect more board members before then through this process.
That's not done.
I do think the committee would be open if anyone had any specific interview questions that you wanted us to include. I'm not sure there were formal interview questions previously.
Sorry, who's been assembled for the nominating committee?
It will be me and Dawn and Mr. Cummings
And Susan.
and Susan. Would you like?
I do have a copy of the questions that were used for the last cycle. I can share those.
Chamber of Commerce Education person was on it one time.
Oh, that you just introduced us to it when I went to the chamber that one time.
Just to make it look a little less.
Ms. Faulkner.
Joanna Faulkner.
Joanna Faulkner from
John
the,
Faulkner. John
Faulkner.
Jonna.
Wow.
Oh, well, I just met her at the chamber, but, and she was the education chair. Yes, she does.
She was
Yeah, she
previously
mentioned
involved
that.
with the school in its first couple of years.
Are we interested in asking her, is that what?
I was just, if we want to pull an outside person, but someone who still had a thread of a connection, at some point to the school, or we can look for a complete, yeah.
If that's what.
I think we should, as we look through our nominations, we should, as part of our board responsibility in recruiting and soliciting future board, I think we should look for some connections outside of the school, and specifically with pluses to core academic experience and knowledge.
Certainly, in our nominating committee, do an assessment of skills and knowledge of our remaining members, and in areas that we may see we're deficient in that we could possibly find out of our nominations. Okay. Go right ahead, Finance Committee.
Yeah, so in your board package, you'll see the updated budget from last month. My question was, there was a difference in the net surplus that showed up. And I just wanted to verify that what it is our final allotment for state funds had dropped, and there was additional money from the state revenue and the test result bonus you'll see on page 1. That's the difference in your net surplus budget. Last month it was right around 166, 170, I don't remember the exact number, but that's why you see it go up to like 201 for the current budget. We feel comfortable with that number as of this date, so just ask the board to approve that budget. And just as we think about the discussion we had with the compensation update from the last meeting, if approved, that's how much it would reduce the net surplus against our current budget for the rest of the fiscal year. Other than that, there were no major changes to the budget.
I'm sorry, if approved, what's the amount? The amount of the approval would be reduced of the surplus? Okay.
So in the addendum that was on the table from last month's board meeting for the compensation adjustment that Ms.
So
Williams presented.
surplus
That's right.
goes down by that number?
That's
Okay,
exactly right.
understood, thank you.
Yes, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to accept the Finance Committee's report on submitted articles.
Second.
Any discussion, questions? All in favor? Opposed? Motion passed. Thank you. Okay, old business is, I believe we have from our January meeting, you should have in your packet the compensation presentation, thank you, that Ms. Pulliam presented. Hopefully you have reviewed over the month so that we can act on the proposal. Are there any questions or comments?
Motion to accept old business, item number 1, to approve it.
Second.
Any discussion, questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed. Any other old business? Okay, new business. I believe we have some field trip forms.
Staff has included in your packet a request for approval of an out-of-state overnight field trip for the 6th grade. It's the annual DC field trip. You will see in that packet the information on the cover sheet as well as a detailed curriculum evaluation, educational connections and outcomes attached as well, so you can see where it aligns to the standards and what the educational goals for the planned trip are. Should be the last few pages of your packet.
So this is the same thing we've been doing, same vendor, same Washington DC?
Correct. I don't think they've changed any vendors.
I'm just saying, I'm gonna make a motion.
I'll just take them all. I'll make the motion to approve.
Second.
Any questions or discussion? Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed. Motions.
And we did want to draw your attention to the updated form that goes along with all of the educational field trips, so that hopefully that will help to make it easier to see the alignment. This big thank you to Dr. Schwartzlander.
Is that what you're talking about?
That's the new attachment that has to be included with all educational field trips. And a big
Yes,
thank you
I
to
appreciate
Dr.
that very
Schwartzlander for
much.
I was
pulling
actually
that
going
out.
to comment on that.
I figured it was already approved. That's required, maybe something that's great.
Under new business, I would like to have a discussion on the signage at Deuce Charter School, since we have possible funding to increase the digital signage at the school and around the school. I know that's been a discussion we had regarding outside digital signage. We've had several times over the years. And so I didn't know, I think we need to have digital signage more inside, and I think we can, have some additional signage outside, I guess, when that all gets done, but inside can start by next academic year, if there's available funds.
Digital signage is as easy as getting, in some cases, inside a big screen TV and putting a plug in, a USB that plays a...
Plug and play.
That plays a powerful. So-
Or a network system
Yeah.
of signage to program.
Yeah.
Is that something that the administration could look at for implementation in the fall? I mean, we've talked about it for numerous
For
times.
inside, I'm a little confused. You mean like that?
Yes, but all over. I mean, different parts of the campus.
Okay.
I'd like to hear a kind of a little bit of a broader perspective from administration on that, in addition to other communication improvements that need to be made. I think that's
Oh, that could, yeah, thanks,
clearly
sir.
one of them. I don't know enough about the daily operations that say, is that a gap with communication to students? Because the major problem is more the communication with parents, and most of the parents are not in the building watching it. Or is it, is the need outside? I mean, I support it. I'd like to make sure it's looked at a little bit broadly.
It's just literally passive advertising and programming. So it's, we need to have things stuck on the wall. And it moves to a digital format that's easy to manipulate, can be quickly changed. If it's networked, it could be emergency information. It could be updates as quick as you change something on the computer. It's just, I think if you see some of the communication packages at some other schools, that you see a lot more digital signage. And it gives a lot of flexibility. And for the most part, I think people have stopped reading bulletin boards and, it's just, so this is what people are used to looking at. And so if you don't present information that way, sometimes it gets overlooked. And this would be a very cost-effective way for us to amp up our communication to our students inside, but indirectly to parents, because Mom, this is what I saw on the monitor today, or they're reminding us the candle things or whatever, so, and it's very low cost, really. So we can have administration develop that in addition to maybe a larger communication plan. Yes, ma'am. We did skip over resource.
I'll just give a couple of updates to everybody. There's a lot going on in the area. The reverse raffle is in full swing. I've got 392 tickets in my truck that I have to go home to put on a board over the next couple of days. So I have to say, I don't know if she came for this one, but I'm gonna call her out anyway. Nicole Bunner is sitting in the back. I'll tell you, her, Lori Woodard, have been two new additions to the committee. Emily Harris on staff. I mean, they have just been an amazing group that's pulled together and done a lot of work. They've got, we got 392 tickets sold. This year, I think with the collective work of the board, with administration, kudos to Amanda as always. We've got somewhere between $12,000 to $15,000 in sponsorship donations. I think last year we had somewhere around 5 or so. So we've really amped it up. And I'll tell you, that's something I think we need to look as fiscal responsibility as board members, as new board members come on. I'll tell you, it carries weight when we reach out to people advocating on behalf of the institution. I think I walked in Amanda's office one day and we made some calls and we had a couple of $1,000 raised, but just by me as a board member making a call. I think we may underestimate the leverage we can have sometimes. So it's that's pretty good. We had, last I heard it, we had like over 8,000, 8,500 or so donations that are going to go in the form of like a chance tickets, set items, as well as the live auction they're going to have. I mean, so when you add all that up, I mean, it's a large number. What was the final number of people that were slated to attend? Yeah, so we've got over 500. Amanda gets a little nervous, but we'll make it work. So we're excited about Friday night for everybody that's coming. We're actually going to send a little teaser email to all the people that put their email address on their tickets that are coming to the event, kind of saying, hey, bring your checkbook. There's going to be a lot of cool things there you may want to bid on. So again, it's just been a fabulous collaborative effort. A lot of people across the school and our stakeholders have jumped in to do it. We did a digital online purchasing process with tickets this year. We learned a lot through that. So all in all, it's been a really good effort. So we'll see how it nets it all out. Typically, you run about 55% profit margin without additional raffle services on top. It's just kind of what we've seen the last couple of years. So what we can do that night and some of those additional services, I think the last 2 years ago it crushed just about 75% profit margin on tickets we sold. So it's good. It's a good opportunity for the school. It gets our name out there in a lot of channels. In fact, we've actually had a couple of reports of prospective parents that came to the new parent interest meeting the other night, actually bought tickets because they wanted to come and see what it was about. So it's kind of interesting to hear those stories. So just a great to that whole team for working together. We are looking at a couple of options with the facilities group around some of the future plans for the campus as far as the trees in the front and back from a couple of different angles. At the end of the day, it's really a facilities decision, but just Chris and I have been talking about it. We've got multiple quotes on timber prices and some of that stuff because we're trying to look long-term about some of the needs of the school from a parking perspective and future building strategy. But as any decisions that are actually finalized, we'll share that. It'll be shared from the facilities group back to the board before they make any final decisions. And I think that's it. I think I missed anything from the resource center. I do think we should remember, we did, from a resource perspective, when you're talking about funds availability, as part of our strategic planning, we do have cash, sitting in the bank. We build up those reserves on purpose, right? I mean, so at what point, do we continue to grow that versus make strategic investments? That's something the board really needs to keep front and center is kind of you put your money where your mouth is, right? So we just need to evaluate the needs assessment, the strategic plan, and then decide, from a financial perspective, where do we want to leverage some of those funds from our resources perspective.
Well, thank you to the whole team, especially our fellow board member Rodney, who has been very diligent. I know he's enjoyed working with the committee and has mentioned on many occasions how hard they've worked and how much he's enjoyed. So kudos to everyone. We appreciate all that you've done to move the reverse raffle ahead, and we're all very excited for Friday night. And so thank you. We, on behalf of the school and all the students, that it's sure to provide for. Just good job, thank you. So now, having concluded our agenda, I'll entertain a motion for closed session.
Just to clarify, we would, per NCGS 143-318.11A3 and A6 is why we're requesting closed session.
I would like to make a motion that we
have to cite the statutes. We can't just say it's for administration and personnel discussions.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn and go into closed session for personnel and administrative discussion as needed, as per NCGS 143-318.11A6. A3 and A6.
Okay. Someone second already? Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion passed.